So Dissidia Final Fantasy NT is out now for the PlayStation 4 and it features a great diverse cast of 28 characters. On top of that, there's already at least 6 characters coming as DLC in the Season Pass, and if they can add 6 more characters as DLC, then there's certainly potential to add hundreds of more characters as DLC. Hey, it's probably not likely, but in my fantasy based on reality, here's 100 characters that I want in Dissidia Final Fantasy NT. Starting off with where it all started, the first Final Fantasy didn't really have a whole lot of named characters, but there were a few. An obvious pick is Princess Sarah of
Corneria.
I don't think we've actually seen Sarah in 3D before, outside of World of Final Fantasy, and seeing the OG Damsel in Distress in full HD would be pretty cool. I also want Matoya from Matoya's Cave fame. She could fight enemies with her magic broomsticks, just like Mickey Mouse. From Final Fantasy II, we gotta get Minwu in there. He's pretty much the only male white mage in the series. And Tetsuya Nomura said he wants him in, so if it's cool with Nomura, it's cool with me. He's a guest character, but he's in your party more than the 4th main party member. This guy, Leon, and I want him in Dissidia as well. He's got weird motivations. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? We're not really sure. But I'd definitely put him in on the villain's side in Dissidia, kind of like Jack. So from Final Fantasy III, I only want one character, and that is Xandy. The Dissidia games have this weird habit of not putting the main villains of the games in, but putting in secondary villains, and Xandy is way more prevalent in Final Fantasy III than Cloud of Darkness, so stick him in there. Final Fantasy IV was the first game in the series to feature a huge cast of changing party members, and as a result there's loads of characters I want from this game in Dissidia. Obvious picks, Rosa and Rydia, get some more white mage and summoner action in there. I also want Teller too. There's not many sage-like characters in Dissidia, and Teller's destructive magical abilities would be really fun to play around with, so long as he doesn't pass out from the strain of casting Meteor. I also want Edward because a bard in Dissidia would be really cool, and there's hardly any bards as main characters in Final Fantasy games. For villains, let's get Rubicante in there, the coolest and most popular of the 4 archfiends. Also Zemus for the same reasons as Xandy, and let him transform into Zeramus when he gets powered up. For Final Fantasy V, it's gotta be the pirate Faris. And purple haired version please, not blonde a la Dissidia Terra. And let her use her sea dragon Sildra in some way. Secondly, Galuth. Probably the best old party member in the entire series. And obviously I want Gilgamesh back. He was in Duodecim, he took ages to unlock, and he was an insanely dumb character. It was hilarious.
Oh, how I've waited for you, bards.
Weird.
Final Fantasy VI has a ginormous cast of playable characters, so obviously I want a few from this game. Of course, Celis is super popular, she was in World of Final Fantasy, just give her a spot. Locke is criminally underrepresented throughout the series spin-offs. For a game with no real main character, Locke is probably 2nd or 3rd in line for that title. My boy Edgar Ronnie Figaro. I love this man so much, I named my Final Fantasy XI and XIV character after him. I even named my current D&D character after him. Please, put him in Dissidia. His chainsaw gun would tear it up. Setzer. Having a gambler in this fighting game would change Dissidia from a competitive fighting game to Smash Bros with items on. Let's make it happen. Realm. Being able to paint your opponents and send them attacking themselves would be so cool and trollish. And ninja representation is weak in Dissidia, so let's get Shadow in there too. No, not that Shadow. For Final Fantasy VII, coming back from Duodecim is of course Tifa. And sort of coming back from Duodecim, I'd like Aerith in NT. You could download her as an assist character in Duodecim, but only her, no one else. It was weird. Anyway, allow her to actually heal teammates as well as fight, and she could be a lot of fun. Next character, what up fool, it's Barret. A more unique pick, Red 13. Besides Feral Chaos in Duodecim, there haven't been any 4-legged characters. Let's change that. Another unique character could be Vincent. His transforming could be similar to Onion Knight or Cecil, but he could completely shapeshift into different monsters. And besides Vincent, let's get another Turk in there. My favourite is the hot-headed Reno. And let's throw Rufus Shimmer in there too. First of all, for Final Fantasy VIII, bring back the man with a machine gun himself, Laguna. And another obvious pick is Renoa, but she could actually be a really fun character to play as if she was partnered with her dog Angelo. Quistis, the teacher that everyone had a crush on. And he may be similar to Squall, but we gotta have his rival Cypher in there. He's the Jecht to Squall's Tidus, or something along those lines. Come on, it's a crime that there aren't more Final Fantasy IX characters in Dissidia, as that game has an incredible cast. How has Vivi not been in Dissidia already? His classic Black Mage design is iconic to the series, and unlike the original Black Mage from Final Fantasy I, Vivi has some personality. Get him in there. Garnet, of course, another white mage, but she's gotta be in there. Let her use a dagger as well or something. A bumbling but lovable idiot like Gilgamesh, Steiner. Come to think of it, Steiner's large character design would look so weird next to most of the characters already in Dissidia. But that won't stop me from giving my next pick, Quina. She would be so funny in Dissidia. She has the abilities of a blue mage, but she learns her abilities by eating the enemy. Think of the possibilities that could have in Dissidia. She'd be a bit like Kirby. And another character that would legit be awesome in Dissidia, Beatrix. She's just really cool. Need I say more? So Square Enix did give us some clues to who the 6 fighters from the season pass will be, and I definitely think that Final Fantasy X's Yuna is going to be one of the returning characters that they teased. Other than that, from Final Fantasy X, come on, it's gotta be Auron. And I was originally going to pick Waka, but there's enough ball representation already with Tidus and Jecht. So to pick someone with no balls, I'll go with Lulu. Not only is she a mage, but she could also act as a puppet master with her Moogle doll. And let's get the real Final Fantasy X villain in Dissidia, please, Seymour, who would, let's be honest, be a much more interesting and different fighter than Jecht anyway. For Final Fantasy XI, there's over 10 years worth of expansions to work with, and I think each expansion should be represented in some way. For the base game, Shantoto's already in Dissidia, but there have been no Final Fantasy XI villains in it, and I think we should change that with the Shadow Lord. He's the main antagonist in the base game, and he would be unlike any other fighter because of his huge size. For Rise of the Zilla, we could have the villain Eldnosh? Damn you Final Fantasy XI and your lack of voice acting. For Chains of Promathia, bring Prish back. She was actually a lot of fun to play as in Duodecim. For Treasures of Art Urgen, bring in Nashmira. She's a puppet master and someone like that would be super interesting to play as. Let her swap between Ovyang and Nyejing on the fly. For Wings of the Goddess, Lilith. She's a dancer, so she can also be a pretty different and interesting character. For Seekers of Adolin, Arshiela? Oh, dear old Sheila wants a spot in Dissidia? Based on Square Enix's hints, I think that Final Fantasy XII's main protagonist, Balthea, will be one of the Season Pass characters. That's right, I said main protagonist. Don't give me any of that Varn nonsense, it's Balthea all day. Alright, you could make a case that it's actually Ash who's the main protagonist, who should also get a spot in Dissidia. Fran would be great too, considering that A, there are no archers in the game as of yet, and B, there are no tall rabbit ladies in the game either. 2 birds, 1 Fran. For true antagonist representation, Vayne needs to be put in the game. And bring my boy Gabranth back. I actually loved him in the previous game.
Surrender now to oblivion!
For Final Fantasy XIII, I want Snow in Dissidia. I hear a lot of hate for Snow and I don't get it, I actually love Snow. He's one of my favourites from 13. I do think he was another character hinted at too. And then there's Saz. And please let one of his attacks be a short range attack where his chocobo chick pops out and pecks at the opponent. For villain representation, well, the villains in 13 honestly weren't very great. But I'm going to go with Galanth Disley. I thought his name was Barthandulus until I looked it up, but it turns out that's just the name of his boss form. Seriously, let me know in the comments if you remembered the name Galanth Disley from Final Fantasy 13. Disley? Okay, I'll admit that I love Final Fantasy 14, so there's quite a few characters I'd like to see from it in Dissidia. First off, to represent Final Fantasy 14 Vanilla, Louis Soir. He could be another powerful stage type character who could transform into his Phoenix form. Also, why is there only currently 1 Dragoon in Dissidia? Weak, Square Enix. Let's get Estinian in there. Granted, it'll be hard to tell the difference between him and Kain, but hey, they put both Tidus and Jecht in the game, and they're literally indistinguishable. And put Ysayle in the game, also known as Iceheart. Bonus points if she can change into Shiva. For Stormblood, at least could be a cool fit, and I think she's a contender for the Season Pass crew as a means to promote the current Final Fantasy XIV expansion. For villains, La Habrea would be really nice, and I think they should include Gaius Van Balsar, as he was mostly the main protagonist in A Realm Reborn. Now for some wacky characters from Final Fantasy XIV. Hildebrand? If you haven't played Final Fantasy XIV, Hildebrand is perhaps the dumbest and craziest character in all of Final Fantasy, and he even has a storyline that involves both Gilgamesh and Ultros. It's magical. And lastly, for stupid Final Fantasy XIV picks, Good King Mogomog 12. Please? The latest main series game, Final Fantasy 15. This may be overboard, but I want the whole posse in there. Prompto, Gladiolus and Ignis. Give them their Kingsglaive powers. Prompto can zip around blinding people with the flash of his camera and then shoot them. Gladiolus can become enraged and destroy them with his greatsword. And Ignis can
come up with a new recipe,
which by the way can be countered by Queena's Eat attack, just FYI. Some more Dragoon love, get Aranea in there. Her giant chest plate won't get her confused with Kain. We didn't see much of her power in Final Fantasy 15, so bring Luna Freya to Dissidia to show off what she's really capable of. and I think this is a shoo-in for the season pass, Arden. Arden's such a cool villain, and if he plays like a more deadly Noctis, then yum. I'll have that meal, please, Ignis.
That's it!
And lastly, for Final Fantasy XV, we've gotta get Cindy. But not just any version of Cindy, the absolute hottest version of Cindy. Pocket Edition Cindy. Okay, non-main series games now. First off, let's start off with some of the main game's sequels and prequels. Theodore from Final Fantasy IV The After Years. He can play a bit like Cecil, but more focused without the Dark Knight side. Another character I think may come in the season pass, Zack. He's technically a part of Final Fantasy VII, but his main turn in the spotlight was in the prequel Crisis Core. He'll probably play very similarly to Cloud, what with having the Buster Sword and all, but having a character like Cloud who is significantly more cheerful, that's new main potential. This next pick is a little crazy, but from Final Fantasy X-2 I want YRP.
It's showtime, girls.
The Gullwings, all as one character, Sonic Heroes style. Hey, don't ask me how they're going to make this happen. I'm not the one crazy enough to design and integrate 100 characters into a fighting game. From Final Fantasy XIII too, you could have Sarah, you could have Noel, but who I want is Caius. Again, there's a possibility that he may be mistaken for Kane because they're both voiced by Liam O'Brien. And to that I say, play with a Japanese dub, you dummy.
帰ろう。これ以上時を見ないように。
From Lightning Returns Final Fantasy XIII, God himself, also known as Buenavelza. It's cool that they added Ace from Final Fantasy Type 0 in, and there's a bunch more that they could add from that game alone. Personally, I'd go for Deuce, because fitting a bard into Dissidia would be awesome. Her flute powers are kinda clumsy in Type 0, and I'm sure they would be in Dissidia too, but it should be top tier OP, no doubt. I would also pick Seiss and Seven because of their cool weapons. From Breaking Bad, I want Jesse Pinkman. Oh wait, no, that's not right. From Kingsglaive Final Fantasy 15, I want Nyx.
Stop jerking me around.
How long will you do nothing whilst insomnia burns?
Don't hate me, but I haven't actually played the original Final Fantasy Tactics, but I hear Old Man Orlando is super OP, so get him in Dissidia. And yes, this is cheating, but it's technically part of Ivalice, which is technically part of Final Fantasy XII, which is technically a part of the Final Fantasy series, so let's get Ashley and Sydney from Vagrant Story. And while we're on Ivalice, get Montblanc. He'd be a great scholar character or something. From the Chocobo series, bring the most famous Chocobo of all, Chocobo. And from Chocobo's Racing, bring that cute little white mage Shiroma, but don't change her design. Like, could you imagine if they took this cutesy character and made her fit into the Dissidia art style? It'd be pretty weird. Bring back Chaos from the older Dissidias and make Cosmos playable this time. I have no idea why Chaos was playable but Cosmos wasn't. And make sure Chaos is still voiced by Keith David. Do you remember the Final Fantasy anime? What about the iconic characters Pretz from Final Fantasy Legend of the Crystals and Ive from Final Fantasy Unlimited? Of course you do, and that's why they need to come back to the spotlight in Dissidia. I think if Dissidia wants to truly stand as a historical museum of Final Fantasy, then it needs to venture into some of the cancelled Final Fantasy games or concepts that didn't quite make it into full games. So how about we get Girl from the N64 Final Fantasy VI tech demo, who definitely isn't Terra. Or what about that beloved character, Noctis' driver from a Final Fantasy Versus 13 trailer, or who I like to call Guy with Moustache. But what about the true deep cuts? There was a planned mobile game that was part of the Ivalice series known as Fortress. It was really only unveiled and cancelled behind closed doors, but there is some concept art of the game floating around. I'd really love to play as Armoured Guy in Dissidia NT. And Square Enix, there's no reason why we can't play as some of your other properties in Dissidia NT. These are the DLC characters I'd like to see from Square Enix games that are not Final Fantasy. Chrono, Randy from Secret of Mana, Aya from Parasite Eve, Rayjack from King's Knight, Goofy, Tom Sawyer from Square's Tom Sawyer, and Super Mario. For number 99, there's a recurring Final Fantasy character that I've not mentioned so far, but I feel that he should come to Dissidia in all of his forms. I am of course talking about Cid. Cid, who appears in almost every Final Fantasy game, should be able to transform into all of the Cids. Starting off with Frog Cid from Final Fantasy IX, you can eventually power up to become the Blacksmith Cid from Final Fantasy XI. You must then take the time to craft your weapons, be it a hammer or a lance or a Gatling gun. You can then transform into the different Cids that use those weapons. Cid is also the only character who can ride around in an airship or the Balam Garden during battle. Last up is a truly iconic Final Fantasy character. One that appeared in many of the older Final Fantasies, took a break for a little bit in the middle, but has mostly come back into prominence in newer games. We've never seen this character fight before, only because if it unleashed its power, it would decimate everything in its path. When it comes to Dissidia, it will most certainly be the toppest of tiers and the oest of peas. This character is... Okay, I hope you enjoy listening to the 100 characters I want in Dissidia Final Fantasy NT. I hope you can get from the vibe of this video that it was mainly kind of a jokey video, but yeah, most of these characters I would actually like to see. I mean, I didn't think about how awesome Quina would be in Dissidia Final Fantasy until I started writing this video, so... Anyway, let me know in the comments what Final Fantasy characters you'd like to see in Dissidia Final Fantasy NT, and thanks for watching, and as always, have fun playing video games.